Let me share this out too. Damn. Okay. Make sure you guys can hear me. Okay, audio's on. Welcome. What's up, iCkEdMeL? Welcome to the live stream this evening. Thanks for joining me. Let me put this out. So I'm on StreamYard today. So Lord help me. So we can have our guest panel on. She's going to join us in a bit. We're going to be talking about the affidavit. Make sure I have my cell phone. Okay. We're going to be talking about the affidavit and taking questions for, and that's true. Affidavit came through. Where's the affidavit at? Affidavit came, another affidavit in the chat. This is a different one. Thank you, Mel, for empowering affidavits everywhere. So I'm going to have somebody I have a bunch of questions already, or quite a few questions, not a bunch, but I have questions on Discord that people contributed. So I appreciate that. I'm going to have Katrina monitoring the chat for me. So if I have to slow the chat, if I end up having to do that, you guys let me know. Getting a little bit warmed up. And before we start with the affidavit, I just wanted to touch on something real quick. Another twist, another back on whatever was previously said. So let's see, how do I do this? Bow. So let me just cover this real quick. And it says here, I'm not going to believe this. Remember how we were talking about the vehicles that stopped Brian and his father in Indiana? You know, at first people were like, oh, it's part of the plan. It's the plan. You know, they're watching, blah, blah, blah. Then that article came out that I showed that said ISP really didn't know about this. Then another article said that they did know about this. Then now it says they didn't know about this. So it says here the FBI disputes report that agency directed Indiana police to pull over Idaho murder suspect. I don't know. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Originally it was like a Fox article, and now it says FBI denies directing Indiana police to pull over BRYAN Kohberger. So there was some sort of source that had said they were involved, and people were like, "You see, it's part of it. It's part of it." Now it's like they're not involved. Dios mío. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is pushing back against reports that it directed law enforcement agencies in Indiana to pull over Idaho murder suspect BRYAN Kohberger. Police stopped Kohberger on I-70 eastbound in Hancock County on two occasions about 10 minutes apart on December 15. The Hancock County Sheriff's Office in Indiana State Police both released body camera footage of encounters. In both cases, police informed Kohberger that he had been stopped for following another vehicle too closely. He was left with a warning. Kohberger, this is weird. It doesn't line up the mouse. It's really weird. Kohberger and his father were stopped in Indiana while driving from Washington State to Pennsylvania. So reports later emerged that the FBI surveillance tracking Kohberger on his cross-country drive directed law enforcement in Indiana to stop Kohberger so they would get video of him in his hands. The FBI said that isn't the case. Contrary to reports, on December 15, traffic stops conducted on the vehicle being driven by BRYAN Kohberger in Indiana were not requested or directed by the FBI. Okay? So that's that. Another affidavit. There can only be one. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Hold on a second. I got a seed in my mouth. I don't want to do this on camera. Okay. Okay, hopefully that All right. So Maven is going to be joining us. We're going to be going over the questions, and I have the affidavit up here so we can reference it. We might even do calls, but first I'd rather let's take the questions from Discord. Let's take the questions from the chat. And let me bring in Maven right now. Let's see. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Amazing. How you doing?
Doing well. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience as an attorney?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I'm Jess. I'm also known as the Mystery Maven, and I have 23 years experience as an attorney. I have a JD and an LLM, so Juris Doctorate, but also a Master's of Law, which is basically another year of law school where you go and you study something specific. So I did that as well. I did about 11 years as a municipal government attorney where I was a special prosecutor. So we prosecuted criminal cases and also defended the municipality in various claims. And I have civil law experience as well. Following my 11 years, I went on to do mostly private practice, doing criminal defense work and some civil work as well. Presently, I am a member of the New York State Bar. I am a member of the National Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys, and I've kind of changed direction in my life in the last couple of years. I think because of the C virus. And you know, and I have a daughter, and I'm a single mom, and so for me, I wanted to be able to have more time with her as well. So I kind of backed off a little bit of how much private practice I'm doing. And I devote most of my time now to working with crime victims and families, doing it pro bono. And, you know, my basic job now that I do on the side with that is I work on appeals. So I do a lot of appellate work as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining, and I appreciate your experience. And you've been following this case, right?
Oh my gosh, I have, and it's just horrible.
Right. And you followed the today, this whole affidavit that came out?
I did see it. And before I even say anything about that, I just want to say I was watching you when you started, and you mentioned the FBI thing, like that they're coming out now with a statement, I guess, that they didn't say that they were directed to pull somebody over. And I mean, I really hope that's true, because yesterday I was looking at Twitter and I saw an article. I don't really remember which TV station or which media outlet published it, but it was like in regards to having the police just stop the cars. Right. And it just really concerned me as an attorney, because there is oftentimes many challenges to things like that. If police pull somebody over because they're directed to do it and they don't have a legitimate reason to be pulling them over, like they have to have suspicion that the person broke some sort of traffic law. Like, so I guess in this case, they were saying that he was tailgating. So that's a little, I mean, that's kind of broad, I guess, but it concerned me, because I figured if that was the case, then his attorneys are going to completely attack using that footage, because that would be like fruit of the poisonous tree. I don't know if you've heard that.
No, but can you explain it?
Sure. It just means that if they were to pull somebody over because they were directed, right, not because they genuinely independently decided, oh, that person you know, should be pulled over because they were tailgating or because they were speeding or whatever the case might be. If that happens and they pull somebody over just being directed, and then they get the footage, the body cam footage, because they said they were looking for his hands. They wanted to see, I guess, his hands, maybe his arms and wrists. Whatever video they would get, that would be an illegal search. So it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, because they didn't have their own probable cause to pull the person over. So a defense attorney is going to go into court, and what they're going to argue is that anything that was obtained, including that body cam, if it's sought to be used as evidence against him in a court of law, they're going to want that suppressed. And they call that fruit of the poisonous tree. So the poison part is the illegal stop, and then they consider that a search, even though it's like body cams are not like physically searching you, but it's still a search, right? They're still getting something out of it. So anything that was collected pursuant to that poison is considered fruit of the poisonous tree. So I am relieved. I was really concerned. I was like, oh no, like this isn't good. Like, please don't start off on this foot with this case, because we need a conviction if he's the one who did this, you know?
So that would have been something that could have been bad, potentially, right?
Very bad. Yeah, it would hurt. You know, the defense attorneys would go in and say, let's throw this evidence out. So, I mean, we saw this affidavit, and there clearly is a lot of various kinds of evidence here. And I don't know how significant not having the body footage, the body cam footage would be at this point, knowing that they have all of this. But it just was like, in my mind, I'm like, no, please, this is not a good way to start out, you know. But I feel better knowing what you just said, that they put out a statement saying.
Yeah, I'm so glad too for that
That's
clarification. Yeah, that's really
Definitely.
important. Let me ask you this quick question too before we get started. The Mad
Sure.
Catter asked, "Have you ever worked a criminal murder case?" Thank you for being here.
Yes, I have.
Okay, interesting. I guess. Do you want to start? Should we? Do you want to start anywhere specific first before we go over questions,
I mean, it's
or
up
should we
to
just
you.
take them?
Yeah, we can take questions, whatever, and then we can refer to the actual document if we need to.
Okay.
I looked it over. I even made notes because you asked me to be on, so I'm like, oh, let me take notes on this. So
let me ask you this. I know we kind of talked a little bit on the phone about this, with regards to the father's DNA.
yes.
Here. And so over here it said,
I think it's on the last page.
Yeah, let me pull it up for you guys too.
Yeah.
Page 19. So it said here that the evidence was sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing on December 28th. The Idaho State Lab reported that a DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from a sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of suspect profile. At least 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. What the hell does that mean?
All right. Well, basically, I mean, for anybody who hasn't gone through this, we learned that they found the sheath, and the sheath on the little button snap, it had some sort of DNA evidence on it that they were able to retrieve. And we don't know if, at this point, if that was blood. It could be saliva, it could be sweat, it could be touched DNA, it could be any of those things. But somehow they were able to lift DNA, which is a good thing. And what they did is they went to Pennsylvania, and then FBI agents posed, I guess, as garbage collectors, and took their trash and went through the trash, and they retrieved something from the trash. I don't think it specifies here what they took, but it was trash that was discarded. Right. And they were able to match the DNA up. Now, this whole thing here where it talks about the suspect's biological father, the reason it's saying that right now in this affidavit is because this is where the genealogical profiling stuff came in. And I'm assuming that they probably used like 23andMe or something. And they were able to take the DNA that they retrieved and connect it through that to the father. Okay, so that was the connection. But what's going to happen now is that there will be a request by the prosecution, and they'll try to get what's known as a buccal swab, which is basically a long Q-tip. Like if you've ever had strep throat or something like that, and they swab your throat, it looks the same. It's the same thing. And they'll go in and they'll just swab your cheek, and then that will be his direct DNA. So what they'll do is then they'll test it, and hopefully they'll get 100% match, as close as they can. I don't know if it's going to be 99.999 or if it's going to be 100, but that's the goal here. And so this right now was excellent because it's what it says 99 point whatever it is of the male population, but they can probably even get it higher once they do that buccal swab and then compare. So there was a match to his father. Correct. Yeah. Right. And that was discovered through somebody in his family. Like, I don't know if it was his sister or cousin or whoever, but somebody uploaded that stuff, their DNA, and then and that's, I guess, legal to do that. Maybe they had it. Well, it said. Yeah. It's definitely that's absolutely legal to do. And when you submit your stuff, your DNA, like I did it once, but I think I did Ancestry, and law enforcement doesn't work with Ancestry. They work with 23andMe, and then there's the other one. I'm sure somebody in your chat knows. And so when you sign up for that, there's all that like privacy stuff that you have to agree to, and there is a way to opt out of it, but if you opt into it, then the police can go in, and the genealogical people who do this kind of work can go in and then use that and try to connect it with whoever they're looking for. Okay, let me look this up real quick. Okay. With law enforcement, because I actually looked at this the other day, and I know what you're talking about. There's some of them. There's something that do work with law enforcement. I don't know which specific ones it is, because there's multiple. There are, genealogy, right? Websites. Maybe the admins can look into that after. Yeah. Another thing. So maybe I'll just go through some of the questions, and we'll just bounce around. Okay. Mo had this question, and she said, "If the cell towers show a large area of coverage,
could the defense get the cell pings thrown out?
Meaning that it's too broad? Is
Yeah.
that
Or
okay?
s-
Well, I mean, when I took a look at this, let me see if I can find it. Like I said, I
yeah.
have notes here, but they talk about the search warrants that they obtained. Let me see what page that's on. I think is this it? Trying to find it. It's somewhere in the middle of this. They talk about the fact that they were authorized to get these search warrants, okay? And that authorizes them to go and get the cell data, like the dump and all of that kind of stuff. And it was limited. It was limited in terms of what they were going to get.
Mm.
And that's a good thing.
It does,
because
and they did limit the even the time frame, right? Like the
they did. They did. I think it was something like 24 hours before and 24 hours
Yeah.
after or something to that effect. And that is a very good thing because with search warrants, very often a defense team will come in and try to make the argument that they're so broad. So if they were to say, like, let's get some gigantic area and get all of the phones in that area and all this data, that's not going to work because the defense attorney is going to come in and attack that. And they're going to say that's overly broad. Like the scope has to be much more limited in terms of time, in terms of location, what you're looking for. So it definitely could be problematic if it was broad, but it does seem to suggest from the affidavit that we wouldn't have that problem. So that's a good thing.
Okay. And then also she says, also if there was not enough DNA on the sheath for the defense to test, could they get the DNA thrown out? But yeah, how does that work? Don't they store it? So like,
Yes, they would save it. Now, it's hard to say at this point and how much they had, because they could do like consumptive testing. Now, I don't know if you follow the Daybell case, but anyone who
no.
follows Daybell will know that that's something that came up, that there was some kind of evidence. I can't remember if it was DNA evidence or blood evidence, but there was some sort of biological, evidence that they wanted to test. And what happens, it's called consumptive testing. And, you have to go before the judge, you have to make a request and both sides have to present, the reasons why they want to do it. And it's like this whole procedural thing. And basically what it means is that whatever they're trying to test is so small that when they go to test it, it's going to use it all up. So sometimes they have to try to figure out how they're going to work around that. And I think in Daybell, what they are going to do is it's going to be whatever that item was, they're going to test it somewhere and it's going to be in a non-state facility, so a private facility. And both the prosecution team and the defense team can have representatives there to observe it, to make sure it's done properly and correctly. So that way, if the defense was to see this is all screwed up, like something happened here in the testing, they'll have a witness. Okay, they'll have somebody there on their behalf to make sure it's done properly. So even if there was just limited amounts of DNA here, there is a way around that in order to use it. So I don't think that there would be any problem in terms of having it suppressed or thrown out or anything like that.
Okay, let me ask you something too, because outside of this affidavit, the other day, I think yesterday, I covered that Ann Taylor, the defense attorney, like they had their team out there at the house, the murder scene with their own investigators and reconstructing, I think, the crime scene. Like, any thoughts on that? Is that something normal, kind of abnormal, or for a public defender?
Okay, it was odd to me that she was provisionally appointed to him. And that's interesting because you don't see that every day. Normally, somebody is arrested and then somebody goes into the courthouse. And then at that point, they're, given the why they were arrested. The judge will discuss what's going on with the defendant. And then they'll be given the opportunity, if they don't have an attorney, like they'll get a whole disclosure on like what their rights are. And one of those things, if they can't afford an attorney, is that they can have one appointed. But it seemed premature here because he was arrested based on the warrant in Idaho. But then, so I would have thought his attorneys, then the public defender, should have been appointed when he actually was in Idaho this morning, not before. But my understanding is that they provisionally appointed her, so it was like done a little bit ahead of time. So they must have had some sense of what was going to happen there. So it was definitely surprising to me to see that they were already at that house at the crime scene, like with investigators, and that they're going to go apparently and reconstruct the scene. It just seemed very early on in the process to do that. It also does suggest to me that, and it's something that's concerned me the whole time, if I'm honest, is I think that they're going to be really focusing on the collection of the evidence at that scene. And I said in some of the videos on my channel that it really concerned me because the more people who go into a crime scene, the more you kind of like grit your teeth and you take a deep breath and you're like, oh man, please
Right.
let this go okay. Because the more people you have in there, the more the chance is that the evidence could be tainted in some way. So, and plus, if you ever watch trials, defense attorneys are always going to talk about, they're going to attack the method, the storage, the collection of the evidence. They're always going to go for that. That's their goal. I shouldn't say their goal, but like that is a huge part of pretty much every case is the evidence. And you want to try to get the evidence suppressed if it wasn't obtained properly, through the proper way and legal methods.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was interesting because I know she had a previous case that I covered to that, like in 2006. She got this guy's charge, a murder thing overturned. He did end up getting convicted though in the second trial, but she found something that like the cop lied or something like that, and she was able to get him out for a while.
Right.
So,
and
pretty
what I
interesting.
saw about her, I mean, she seems like sharp as a tack, and she seems like an excellent lawyer. And I definitely think that there's a fallacy that oftentimes people will say, oh, public defender, good luck with that. Like they're, they're not good at what they're doing. And I always say, I've met a lot of public defenders that are probably the best attorneys. You want that person representing you. And part of it in my mind as an attorney is because I think they're motivated by a different thing. They're not motivated by money. And, that's not what they're after. They're working for the public. Now, public defenders don't get paid great. Like if you look up salaries in your state, you'll see that you might be surprised that even prosecutors and public defenders, they do not make the big bucks that you think because it's government work. And there's other benefits that offset that. But very often the people that you see in those positions are extremely passionate about the law and about the Constitution. And they're more about, upholding the Constitution and doing what's right and things like that. So it's a different motivation. And I think that can make people excellent, excellent attorneys and a force to be reckoned with.
Very interesting. Thank you. All right, let's get some of the other ones. So does the affidavit need to include all the evidence they have against the defendant at the time, or just enough to get approval for the warrant?
Just enough for the approval of the warrant. This is the probable cause affidavit. So probable cause, it's just enough information that you would give the judge to demonstrate and make a reasonable person think that a crime was committed. Okay, so here, there is quite a bit. I mean, I would have expected this to be much more redacted given the gag order. I was surprised to see this.
I got a lot,
like this is a lot. So I'm like, wow, what else do they have? Because this is a lot of stuff. It really gives you a very strong idea of how they put this all together, which is kind of remarkable. You don't see that every day where they're going to give you that. And I really thought, like with the gag order already in place, that this thing was going to be heavily redacted. I'm very surprised that it is what it is. So they definitely don't need to give all of their evidence. And, a prosecutor doesn't want to do that. They want to just give enough information. Like they don't want to tip their hand early on, and of course, all the evidence, for and against their case will be all revealed during the discovery process, and it will come out. And eventually we'll all learn about it, like during the trial and stuff. The documents will get unsealed most likely, and then we'll have an idea of what's going on.
Amazing. Let me see here. Okay. Hash Uchiha says, can the defense ask for bail again at another date? If so, what is the likelihood of him being granted bail?
In the state of Idaho, and I actually didn't know this myself and had to look this up when this whole thing was going down. On the warrant itself, it indicated from the very beginning, no bail. And in the state of Idaho, once that is on there, that's it. And the judge actually doesn't have discretion to change that. So this issue, like there's never going to be like a bail hearing. And if they were to do it for some reason, it would be denied, because really when they're looking at bail and whether or not to grant that, they're looking at is somebody a risk to society, a physical threat to everybody in the community. And obviously here with what we're reading and seeing and these arrests and the charges, he's a violent risk. And then there's also other things like, will they flee? Do they have the financial ability to flee? Do they have ties to the particular area? So in Moscow, does he have ties? Things like that. So even if they were to give him, like, even assuming arguendo that they say, oh, we'll have a bail hearing, he's not going to get bail.
Okay. A quick sidestep too of a question that I have for you. Somebody noticed this, and this was sent to me on Twitter. Apparently they were like, it looks like there might have been a mistake. And so
I see that
the phone numbers at one point, it was the last 4 digits was mixed up as 8548 instead of 8458.
I see that.
Can that cause any issues, or is just that just gonna be like, oh, that's just clerical? Like, it's not gonna be.
That'll just be a clerical error. It's possible that the prosecution, if they see this, if they're aware of this now, that they might file, an amended affidavit just to clean that up and fix that. Sometimes you see that. I think even in the Gabby Petito case, I think initially they released something. I think it was the something with Brian Laundrie. I'm trying to think what it was, and I think it was the federal arrest warrant, and like they cited something wrong. I think it was like the wrong law, or it was something, and they had to go back and amend it just to correct it. But no, this appears to me anyway to be a clerical error. So
okay. All right, I'm going to get to some of the next questions. And Mystery Maven, Jess, thank you so much again for being on tonight. Sure. You're doing amazing. It's easy to talk to you. So I appreciate that. Make sure you guys subscribe. Thanks.
Likewise. Sure I like your channel. Your channel's very chill, and I love the chat. Like, everybody's cool in here. And I like that.
The chat's kind of crazy sometimes too, but
sometimes
they are really nice. Yeah. So make sure you guys subscribe to our channel as well. I'd appreciate that, and hit like on the stream to help get the video out. All right, and so I'm still moving through the Discord questions. I am getting the live chat questions sent to me as well. Katrina's doing that, so I'm going to get the live chat in a bit.
Excellent.
Okay, Miss Steeler says, what evidence in Affidavit could not be tossed? How likely would eyewitness statement hold up? I guess is there something definitive that definitely, I mean, is all of it hard to get tossed, or is there anything specific that you think maybe could be tossed?
At this point, we don't have enough facts to make that assessment. If something in this warrant was to be challenged, most likely we would be talking about that they didn't follow the proper protocol for obtaining the evidence. And again, that goes back to the number of people there. And also, when I was looking at them when they were visiting the crime scene, this is when they were actually processing things, and that whole, I don't know how, 40-something days where they were in and out of that house. I saw things that struck me as a little like, where I was like, oh boy. And it was like, like they weren't wearing like Tyvek suits all the time, for example. Right. And like that's
the bodysuit, like
that's like a full body suit. Right. But that struck me. The last thing we want is like an O.J. Simpson case where if you followed that trial, right, so much of that evidence, I mean, that was really egregious. I mean, that was crazy. Like, I don't even know how that could happen. Like, some of it was crazy. There was something in that case where the police went to get blood stains out of, like, I don't know if it was like the Bronco or whatever, and they used like something to collect it, and they were going from like one spot to the next spot, and they were using the same swab. Like, instead of like saying, okay, let me use this one thing to get this, right, and then throw it away, or put however they discard it, and then let me start over and do the second one. They literally were like, let me do this one, and then let me do that one, and they weren't changing it. So there was stuff like that was like really egregious and stuff. And then they also, like, in that case, they stored evidence that was biologic evidence, which has to be refrigerated. And apparently they just threw it in the back of a police vehicle for like 8 hours or something. So a lot of that evidence could not be used. It was a huge problem. So like, those are the things that were going through my mind in this case. Like, I hope that's not happening here. And they did have a lot of assistance. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they did this all right. But in terms of what's in here in this affidavit, my feeling is like, we don't really know, because even if they are aware that there are some weaknesses, like maybe, I mean, this is totally like just made up stuff, but this is speculation on my part. But let's just say, as an example, that they know that they kind of dropped the ball collecting some kind of evidence. They're not going to say that in here. That's going to come out in discovery, and the defense attorney is going to say, hey, wait a minute, and they're going to look at how this stuff was, like, was it labeled properly? Was it stored properly? Was it collected properly? Like, there's all those things, and that's when they're going to start to try to get some of it suppressed. So here we just don't know. So we'll have to wait and see. The one thing though, that's exactly right, serial killer. That's
Right.
exactly
That's
where I was
interesting,
going.
right?
Yes, that's what I was going to say, is that footprint. That concerned me because they said they found it on the second go around. Now, I don't know how long the first go around was. Like if you look at that second line, it says this was located during the second processing of the crime scene, right?
Right.
But I mean, I'm not throwing any shade at anybody. Like I don't know how long the first investigation was. Like maybe that was I don't know. It's hard to say because we don't have the facts. But I mean, that makes me wonder. But they do go down below and they say that it was similar to in that parenthetical, it says similar to the pattern of a Vans type shoe.
Oh yeah.
Right. So they don't say it here, but I would love to know, does he have Vans, right? Does he have Vans shoes? Because then that would kind of measure up to like what he wears on his feet. So we'll have to wait and see, but that's a really good question. And I totally agree with you, serial killer. It's weird.
Serial killer. All right. Okay. Next one. What dictates, Susie says, what dictates how much actual evidence is in a probable cause? And I don't know.
That's discretionary. That is a determination for the prosecutors. Like I said, like in my experience, I was very surprised to see this much. This is a really lengthy document. It's like what, 16 pages, I think. And you don't see that every day. I mean, sometimes you see them and they're like a page and, you know, a little bit more like on a second page maybe, but you know, a lot of times it's like bare bones. So this was a lot. But again, it would be a judgment call for the prosecution as to why they did that. It is possible that they were thinking too, like maybe they wanted the public to feel comfortable that they have the right person. You know, they have been in the spotlight in terms of there was a lot of criticism going on all this time. And, you know, and I understand like the parents of Kaylee, you know, the father was speaking and very upset about everything. And, you know, how slow he felt things were going along, which totally get, like, absolutely understand how horrible this is. I mean, nothing prepares you for this until you're immersed in something like this, really. So, you know, I do understand that point. But again, I think that it's possible they were doing it to just give some kind of comfort, perhaps. And maybe they even considered the fact that they have a university there, that maybe that factored into it. And one thing that's always been of interest to me in this case is the fact that, I don't know if people realize this, but there's a lot of lawyers that are involved in this. And I don't mean like, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of people on staff at the DA's office. I mean, there's also the Moscow, they have a city attorney. So the city attorney probably has an interest in this case. There's the university council. So they have an office that's staffed by attorneys, and they handle that. So like all of them, I'm sure, had some kind of communication because this thing is affecting so much of what's going on there. So it's not just like the DA. I mean, yes, the DA handles the criminal part of it, and you know, they're the lead on this and everything like that. But I'm sure that there was input in some way from these other agencies. When I worked for a municipality, I mean, there were things that came up, and there was always input by various entities, you know, whether that might be like the county where you're at, the town where you're at, the city where you're at, you know, like there's always like sort of things like that lurking beneath the surface. So here, I thought maybe they were doing that because they know that this kind of a case and the way the public was kind of criticizing them, and it's a university that, you know, it supports the town, right? It supports the city. Like all of the businesses are provided and supported by the professors, the students, all those people. So there definitely could be like an interest there. And I thought maybe that's why they released all this information, was to kind of give the public a sense of, we got the right person here and this is what we have.
Right. Great. Next question. Will the defense try to place suspicion on DM? And I do want to know more of your thoughts on DM maybe later, but the roommate, I don't know.
You know, here's the thing. Like, it's that whole thing where she said that she was frozen, right? Frozen shock, I think she said. You got to understand that, first of all, it's a young person, right? I mean, she's young, you know, probably not a lot of like real big life experience and things like that, right? And in that moment, I mean, even when you go through what she told the police, like, and gave her statement, I'm sure in that moment she wasn't thinking to herself, there was some horrible crime going on. I mean, if she really believed that, she probably would have never come out of her room in the first place, right? But we don't know the circumstances of him like being there and her observing him. I mean, I don't know if it was like a shadowy spot. Was she standing on the stairs and was like maybe only her head looked up? Like, I don't know.
That's
You
what
know,
I
like
was
I don't.
confused too. Like I was wondering when she gave her account here on the third time opening the door,
Yes.
because I said she heard crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask
Mhm.
that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. So I'm like, did he see her? Did he not see her? I'm still, it's hard to,
It's very odd. It really
yeah,
is odd. And you know, and she says it says that they quote her that she stood in a frozen shock phase, right? I
right,
mean, the thing that I keep going back to on that is that she's saying that to the police with hindsight, right? Because now she's telling the police that after she knows that her friends were brutally murdered. So the way she's going to look back on it and think about it is going to be different than in the moment. So in the moment, she might have just said, well, this is totally weird, right? But I
mm,
mean, anybody who's going to college has probably seen some weird stuff, you know? And that
right,
house had
right.
people going in and out all the time, and it was like the party house. Who knows what was going through her mind at that moment? So I'm sure that that poor person, DM, I feel sorry for her. I think that she
Oh yeah, it's
probably
got to be.
has a lot of, you know, stress, probably PTSD. I mean, I feel for them. I feel bad for them. But I think that a defense attorney could potentially, if there's a trial, like if he pleads not guilty and then we see a trial happen, they could probably ask her, you know, why didn't you call the police? Like, why did
Mm,
you, if you thought, were you afraid, you know, and they're probably going to try to, you know, suggest that she wasn't scared, that she, you know, that this was just her saying this later on, you know, and they're going to
right.
talk about the timing of her statement and things like that.
They're gonna try to
Um,
poke holes or
but
whatever. I guess.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I think that like when you talk to a jury, I mean, I don't think that's going to be that persuasive. You know, I
Right,
don't
right.
think that, I think a jury's going to be like, well, she didn't know. I mean, I would think a prosecutor would follow up the DA's cross examination and say, well, like, did you know that this guy committed a crime at the time? Did you know your friends were dead at this time? And she's going to say no. Right. So then a jury's going to say, well, yeah. Right. I mean,
Right.
because I think a reasonable person, if they knew something horrendous was going on, would go call the police. And she didn't do that. So, you know, we'll have to
All
see.
right. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, let's see. Okay. Will the way they collected evidence be called into question? I know you kind of talked about it a bit, along with how DNA was collected. I know you kind of touched on that a bit already, but
Yeah, I mean, they're going to look at how it was done and if it was
right.
done the right way. And, you know, they will. It's just the nature of the beast. That's what's going to happen. So, yeah.
Um, do you think having the sheath of the knife and not say hold on? Do you think not having the sheath of the knife and do not have knife as evidence will this case be strong enough to obtain conviction? So yeah, how important or I mean just not having that weapon. I don't know where I went here.
Well, I know. Where'd you go?
My screen is gone.
Uh, um, you know, obviously, there's certain pieces of evidence that are considered to be very strong evidence, right? And they're because they're considered direct evidence of a crime. So, one of those things is the murder weapon.
Right.
And to our knowledge, based on this affidavit, we can sort of speculate that they don't have a murder weapon. There's always a chance that they do have a murder weapon and we don't know it, but we'll see.
Do,
That remains to be seen. We really don't have any information
do you
on
remember
that.
that part of the affidavit where they were like, I'm trying to remember where it was at. They were like, okay, and there's two things I'm kind of thinking in my head because
Okay.
like he was there the morning of.
Hmm.
Like I
The
mean I know
next
it's
day,
just
you mean? The
next
next
day,
morning? Yeah,
next
I
day,
saw
yeah.
that. Yeah.
That was pretty weird.
Yeah.
And then the route that he took in between, he had turned off his phone. I forgot what day. I was
Yeah.
just wondering, like, is maybe was he getting rid of evidence? Because like the same night he did the same route, kind of, and then the next, I forgot
Right.
what day it was.
Yeah, it's
Pretty
hard to
weird.
say. Like, was he reliving something, or,
Right.
you know, it's very hard to say. But I don't think I think that we have enough here. The fact that there is DNA like that, right? And then they're probably going to confirm that now with the swab and get a stronger DNA match, okay? Because it'll be his instead of the father's, right? They're going to connect it that way. That's a really strong piece of evidence. It's going to be very hard to overcome that. And then you have somebody matching his description at the scene of the crime that was observed by the eyewitness, the other roommate. That's very strong evidence. That's going to hurt. And then on top of that, and then you have the cell data. Like, so, I mean, I think that the defense attorneys are going to have a hard time with this case. I'm very curious to see if he pleads not guilty, what they're going to be doing and what kind of arguments they can come up with here.
All right.
So yeah, so I think obviously if they get the knife, and like they'll keep looking for it if they don't have it. If they can find it, great. It's just one more thing. Like it's just like another thing to add on to the pile here, right? And it's a good piece of direct evidence. But I don't think not having it is going to detrimentally, cause harm here.
Okay. And let's see here. All right, next question. Since this is a highly publicized case, Hash says, in the media right now, how likely is it that the trial will need to take place elsewhere and jurors will need to come from other counties? Good question.
That's a really good question. Yeah. Well, we know now that, like, obviously from what we've seen and observed, how we've all talked about it, like, obviously this case has gotten national and probably international attention. So it's definitely going to be a concern. It'll be on the radar, probably more for the defense than the prosecutors. But they did get a gag order really early on in the case. So you could argue that that kind of mitigates the risk. Not necessarily, but because they did it so early on, that to me would kind of minimize or lower the rate of success that you would have to get a change of venue. But that being said, I definitely think it's something that will come up in this case if they go to trial. I think it's absolutely going to be a consideration of the defense because, really it's all about having the untainted jury pool. And that seems to be a pretty small county. So I would think that they might have to move it out of there, even with the gag order and everything, they might have to change it to a new location. It's a good question.
Amazing. Now, another question too, which this is from Bex. This is kind of interesting. Is there a possibility that DM could face civil prosecution from families? I think that would be a bad look if they did, but
yeah. I would say no. I can't think of any cause of action that you'd be able to, apply there. So I think no, there probably wouldn't be a case like that. No.
Okay, Harry Potter's beard says, how reliable is the mobile phone mast data? The cell tower pings, could it easily be discredited?
No, that's good evidence. That is excellent. I don't know where it is in here, but they talk. I'm just gonna flip through here because I can tell you I can tell you the right place, like where it is, but they talk about the people. I believe they were people at the FBI, and it was a team, right? And they got the info. Oh, you found it.
Yeah.
You're way ahead of me with that thing.
I could just search. Yeah, no problem.
You go. Yeah, exactly. And so it talks about, how they have the experience and they know what they're doing. So again, it's pretty reliable as long as they obtained it properly. And it looks like they did in terms of like they had the search warrant. The search warrant wasn't overly broad so that it would be subject to a Fourth Amendment challenge. So that's a good thing. And, it seems like the people who were working on it were all certified. I don't remember how many years the guy had. I think it was like 15 years or something. And they had to complete certification requirements. Oh, yeah. So that's something that you would see maybe in a trial that they would say, well, like, who did this? I was covering a trial recently. It was the Kristen Smart trial. And in that case, there were dog handlers. And every time one of the dog handlers would get on the stand in that case, the defense was like, every single time, it was like so annoying to see, but they would try to discredit the dog handler's experience. And they were trying to say, well, this dog handler isn't employed by law enforcement. They're a volunteer. And they were trying to suggest that because of that they didn't know what they were doing or they didn't follow appropriate protocol, even though there was no evidence of that. They still tried to bring that out, right? So that's the kind of thing you could probably see with this cast team, that that's the type of way they would try to undermine that. But it looks here, based on this affidavit, that they were all very trained and had extensive experience. So that's a good thing.
Great. Jackie says, will we possibly have to wait for DM's testimony if it goes to trial to hear her side of the story?
Yes.
I'm sure, right? Yeah, definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Right. Is that why,
because of the gag order? So yeah.
Oh, there. Also, people that are, so the people that are going to be witnesses for the trial, like,
Mm-hmm.
you think they know by now? Like, they've probably been.
Oh yeah, anybody like that, especially her, because she was there, right? And her testimony she's going to be a key witness. Like that's a very, very strong. The fact that he had the
Right.
bushy eyebrows and that she observed him in the house at the time of the death and all of that is very, very strong evidence. So I'm sure when they interviewed her, that they advised her not to talk. And now she knows that she's going to be a critical part of this, so she's going to be subject to that. Mm-hmm.
And do you like? How long before do you think that they would have told her like not to talk? Probably as soon as they even interviewed her. Maybe you think?
Probably immediately. Immediately, yeah. I mean, you could ask probably somebody who's in law enforcement to clarify that. But my experience would be that they would say it right away. And normally, if there's no gag order, right?
Mm-hmm.
The police or the FBI, they can ask somebody not to speak, but there's no legal mechanism. There's no legal power that forces somebody to stay quiet. So before this gag order, technically, if she wanted to speak out or say something, that would be okay. I mean, okay legally, right? I don't know about like morally and ethically, that's a whole different conversation. But in terms of the legality of it, like what normally happens is the person will be interviewed and they'll say like, please don't speak. Like they'll just request it, right? And they'll say, please don't talk to anybody about it. And they'll explain the importance of not speaking out about it. But if that person at that point decides to deviate and go say something, there's really nothing they can do because the gag order doesn't come into place until there's there has to be a case in court. A judge doesn't have like the ability to do anything until that's in the courthouse.
Okay, great. And another just off question that I was thinking. So like if let's say before the gag order, let's say that the roommate had spoken up and like did interviews and stuff, is that something that could hurt the case? Like is that something the defense could use?
Definitely.
Okay.
Generally, the more people who are involved in some way, whether they could be just character witnesses, like somebody who knows that person for a while or in some capacity, or it could be somebody like this, like somebody who witnessed something. Those type of people, if they go around talking to people, that can be a huge problem because a defense attorney is going to be like, wait, you said this here and then you said that there, right? And they're going to like, especially like in true crime on YouTube, I'm always saying this because I think that there's a lot of unethical stuff that goes on and there's a lot of creators that don't understand the legal risk. They don't seem to understand that going and interviewing potential witnesses to things and potential suspects, they don't seem to grasp that they could be hurting justice and they could be harming the pursuit of justice for the victims. And I don't know about you, but like I think that most people in true crime, they're more like victim centric, right? Like we want to see justice, like we all want that, right? So so talking to somebody, like if she was to talk to somebody or whatever and get all that stuff out there, an attorney's going to say, let's look at this person's credibility and let's look at their reliability. And if there were conflicting statements anywhere, they're absolutely going to attack that and try to be like, you can't trust this person. So whatever they're telling you, you need to disregard. We don't want that.
Right. Lisa says, do you think the Reddit post/survey BK posted on Reddit could be entered into evidence, or is it likely judge won't allow it?
I think that's definitely going to be in evidence. And one of the reasons why I say that is because if you look in here in this affidavit, they actually bring that up.
Right.
Yeah, they mention it. So to me, they're going to try to include that as evidence. That definitely suggests that that's what they're going to try to do. Of course, a defense attorney could say like, no, it's too prejudicial and like blah, 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 blah. But we'll see, we'll see what happens because, until this gets more involved, until the preliminary hearing happens and he makes, enters his plea and all of that, it's just hard to say. But I definitely think because of the fact that it's in here, that they will try to seek. It's already really evidence. They've already mentioned it in here. So
great. Why were the charges first-degree murder instead of capital murder? And will a defense team hire an investigator of their own as well, which I think they kind of have? And
yes.
is that provided by the state, like in capital trials?
Yes,
That's
it
from
is.
Ms. Stubbs.
Yes. So the first part of that, let me just see 1 second here. I was trying to see. I thought I had something to to answer that.
Yeah,
but in terms of the team, right? They've already hired people, I guess, who the word on the street is that they're like recreating things. And
right.
yeah, a defense team is going to hire their own experts, their own people, and things like that. So that's definitely going to happen. Not a problem. And the cost of that is going to be something that is borne out of the taxpayers. It's a capital case. And what was the first part again? Now I forgot the first part.
The first part, it's okay. Why were the charges for first degree?
Right.
Why were they first degree murder instead of capital murder?
Well, in the state of Idaho, if you look at the different degrees, it fits best into the first degree category. But the ones beneath that, like first degree does not specify, it doesn't say like capital murder. The thing that makes it a capital murder is whether or not they're going to impose the death penalty. So there's a different statute in Idaho that lists the different circumstances that qualify something to be considered a capital case. So it's kind of like it already is first degree murder, and then we're going to add on whether or not it's death penalty, and that's kind of like part of it.
Okay.
But I think it's safe to assume here, based on the heinousness of these crimes and some of what I've seen about Idaho. Now, I'm not licensed in Idaho, but just because of my background in terms of watching the Daybell case and watch that whole thing unfold for the last couple of years, I think there's a very, very strong likelihood that this will be a capital murder case.
Okay. When can we, Busted Can of Biscuit says, when can we expect BCK to enter a plea?
Well, procedurally, what's going to happen is, I think it's January 12th. He's going to have a status conference, right? So they're going to get in front of the judge, and they're going to basically tell the judge, this is where we're at. It's probably going to depend more at that hearing or status conference that the main focus is probably going to be like the defense, because the defense has to be caught up to speed. So the defense now is going to use this time to try to investigate and to try to use those experts to look at the crime scene and try to find out everything they can. They're going to be like on a fact-finding mission, because as an attorney, they know that this whole plea issue and everything is going to come up pretty soon. And first there will be the preliminary hearing. And at the preliminary hearing, what's going to happen is the DA has to go into court, and they have to convince the judge that there's probable cause for these charges. And I think it's pretty clear that there is, because they're going to use what's in this affidavit, and they're going to present that to the judge. They'll probably have witnesses testify, like the officers will come into court and they'll testify about the evidence, things like that. And then the judge will find that there's probable cause. And then at that point, they'll say that the term of art is that they'll hold him over, right? They'll bind him over. And what that means is like they'll bind him over basically. And that means the case is going to go forward and that trial date can be set. But that's assuming at that point that he enters his plea of not guilty. So it happens, the plea of not guilty or guilty will happen only after that preliminary hearing and only after the judge makes a finding that probable cause exists. And then at that point, he can enter his plea. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't know at this point. I'm not really sure the calendaring of that court. I don't know if they do things quickly or slow. This is a high profile case, so maybe they'll try to push this one along. You know, they have the ability to do that. So
thank you. Great answer.
Sure.
I just picked this out of the chat real quick, and I was wondering about this myself as well. NG Native says, what about Brian's visit to the brewery in Bethlehem, PA around July 22nd? He was creeping out the bartenders, servers, barmaids with inappropriate comments, was noted in their computer admissible.
It's going to depend. It's definitely going to depend on what the judge decides. So there will probably be, I'm sure that they're going to try to, well, it depends on like what they're going to say his motive is, right? We don't really know that. Like we can't really extrapolate that from this affidavit. So we don't know what their theory is for why he did this. Like maybe they're just going to say that he was like, this crazy, like deranged
Do they need one?
person,
Do they have to come up or theorize a motive?
You don't always have to, but if you can, it will help your case. It's going to make more sense to the jurors as to what is going on here. I mean, if you try to not show a motive, that's going to be a hole in your case. So I would think that they're going to come up with something. I'm sure that they've started to piece that together. Whether that is that, there's been speculation like that maybe he wanted to be like notorious as a serial killer or something. Like, it's hard to say what they're going to come up with. But it's definitely something that they would probably want to show that he has this activity, that people were afraid of him, that, he said things to women that were derogatory and all of that. But it will be up to a judge to decide whether or not that is too prejudicial. In other words, if the jury hears that information, they might automatically go to, like, in their minds, well, somebody who said that would probably do this, right? And we don't want that. We want people to just hear the evidence in the case that's, fair and equitable, like for the defendant. He's entitled to a fair trial. And, we don't want to submit information to a jury that they're just going to automatically have a bias against him. So it's definitely going to be something that a judge will have to consider.
Okay, amazing. And this one we kind of touched on, but how significant, Laughing Beside You says, how significant is it that they don't have the actual weapon but the sheath? Could that affect conviction?
Like I said before, I mean, I don't think it's going to affect the case just because it's very strong, the DNA, like, and assuming that they get even a stronger match when they get his DNA from his cheek or whatever. I mean, that's
Can he fight that?
strong.
Or he probably not. Can he fight that?
I mean, he could probably challenge it, sure, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay.
So,
All right.
yeah. I mean, I always say, like, people can challenge everything.
Right. New Orleans lady says, did the lawyer get to go to the house by herself to look at the crime scene, which I know she went with a team, and then she says without any law enforcement, and I think they were accompanied by somebody from law enforcement.
Yeah. I mean, normally there would be somebody there. They wouldn't just give somebody like unfettered, access and be like, go do what you want, I mean, and yeah. And I think that at that point when she saw it, right, they had basically taken it back under their custody. So there would have to be somebody there because it's still under the custody of law enforcement at that point.
And just kind of curious too. So like the whole thing where they actually stopped, they put a court order in to stop them from cleaning the house. Any thoughts on that? Or
that's weird. When I heard that, I was like, huh? Like, I mean, it was like the needle on the record. Like I heard that, I'm like, what?
Right.
Like, because I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that before. So that was unusual. I don't know. It seems like maybe she was, because I had read that she was provisionally appointed, right? So maybe she had been provisionally appointed at that point and then put in, went sua sponte to the court, meaning like on their own accord, and then requested that. Because the only other thing that I could think of was that, I kept saying it's got to be for this. I thought maybe it was for insurance purposes, that maybe the adjusters need to go out and see what the damage is to that house so that the property owner can get reimbursed or something. I was like, maybe that's what this is. That's the only thing that came to mind. Because like I said, I was surprised that this attorney was provisionally appointed so far ahead of like his coming back to Idaho,
Yeah, because I don't even think we knew he had an attorney. Like
we did,
no.
Like,
what's going on?
Right. So I kept saying, well, it can't be his attorney at this point. Like, he hasn't even been, put back in Idaho. Like it didn't make sense to me. I was mystified. But it definitely could be if she's, depending on the timing of when she was appointed, maybe she did it.
Okay. New Orleans lady also said, can the judges change the ruling on cameras in the courtroom in Moscow and Valdo cases?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can definitely try to keep the case closed to the public if they think that it will damage the Sixth Amendment right to the defendant to a fair trial. Yeah. So it's going to be up to the judge. So, I mean, do you see, I feel like we've been seeing that lately in cases. It's going to be up to the individual judge. And when that happens, like you'll see, again, I keep going back to Daybell because it's in Idaho, but it actually involved a very similar issue, and it was like, what's going to be allowed in the courtroom? Are we going to have audio? Are we going to have video? Whatever. So it's really going to, it's possible it could come up. Absolutely. And you know, there'll be lots of people there, probably representing media, and they'll argue that they want the cameras, you know. So we'll see.
Mary says, do you think they will offer him a plea or force it to court?
You know, that's a good question. I would think, I mean, and this is purely like, I don't have all the information,
Right.
but like, if I had all this information on somebody, the only thing I could say is like, well, I would want to talk to the families, right? Like, I would want to see what do the families think. And that's something that happens. Like, the DA will talk to the family about any kind of thing like that. So maybe there is an interest to like have him take a plea and then stay in jail or prison the rest of his life, you know? And it's really hard to say without seeing everything, but it might be like, you know, do they want to send a message and go for the death penalty here? Or, you know, do they feel that they have so much evidence against him that it's just like a slam dunk case, you know? And it's really hard to say as an attorney without seeing all of that information. You know, I'm not, it's hard to say. It really is. But, you know, and it might be like a cost thing too, that could come into it. You know, if he's willing to plead guilty and like go to prison for the rest of his life, maybe that's what's best. Maybe the families will agree to that. You know, I don't know. You'd have to get everybody on the same page though.
Okay. And Lisa asked here, she said, someone in the chat asked this, and I was wondering as well, the no contact order judge made today, is that normal protocol?
Yes. It usually is. Yeah, right. It usually does occur. You know, you see that sometimes they have another name, which is slipping my memory right now. But those are usually imposed against the criminal defendant. And we just don't want the criminal defendant to like go not attack people, but contact people, you know, and harass people. We're trying to prevent things like, you know, witness tampering, intimidation, things like that. You know, we don't want witnesses to have to walk around feeling scared they're going to run into this person.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, yeah, he's locked up and everything, but it's still, it prohibits him from contacting anyone involved.
Okay. Does she think it's still possible they have the DNA under the victim's nails and decided to test the sheath DNA instead and save the under the nails DNA for more accurate testing later?
It's possible. I mean, it's possible that they have more because, like I had said earlier, in the probable cause, you don't usually put a lot. You know, you put enough. It's a different bar than the criminal trial, right? So you don't have to show all your evidence. So they might have that. Like they might have even more evidence that like we would all be like, wow, like because it's really damning evidence, right?
Right.
We don't know that because they're not required to put that in here, and they're probably going to keep some things under wrap. So.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right. Let me get some of the questions from the live chat as well. Katrina's been sending it to me. Willie here has a question, says, can you be convicted of a breach of peace in your own home? I don't know.
Convicted of a breach of peace
in your own home? I'm not sure.
I mean, I guess you could, right? Like if you, meaning like, yeah, I mean, you could probably get cited for it, right? Like a cop would come to your house and like give you a citation of some sort. I don't think you'd get like arrested if you were in your own home. You know, they would probably knock on your door and talk to you and like, probably encourage you to be quiet first, right? Don't breach the peace, keep it quiet.
And I wonder if they're asking that maybe because all the times the cops have been out there. I don't know.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that would probably be, that type of a thing would be under the local code, like the local ordinance, like so a municipal ordinance. So the city of Moscow would have its own noise code. And so if you violate that, they're going to issue you basically a citation. I mean, it's like really a ticket. They're not going to arrest you. They're just going to give you a ticket. And then you would have to go to court to defend that. But I would think they're probably so used to this kind of thing happening there that it's probably not that unusual. And it seemed like people said this was the party house and like the party scene. So they probably are just used to just telling people to keep it down.
Right. And another quick question from Discord. I forgot to ask this, which is an interesting one. Do you think they will call his parents as a witness? Maybe the defense, possibly. I don't know. The mom and dad.
It's possible. It's absolutely possible. Yeah, definitely could happen.
With the evidence they have, which, you know, you don't, we're only seeing this, who knows what else they got. They probably could have a whole bunch of other stuff, but this person says with the evidence they have, what's his best line of defense?
Oh, well, I mean, let's see. One thing he could argue is that he wasn't trying to run away and flee the area, right? He remained in the area. He wasn't like, let me commit this crime and then run off to Pennsylvania. He stuck around for a while. So that could be something that he could argue. I've seen stuff about like he wore gloves around and stuff, and I'm sure that's probably going to come out. They probably have some kind of
Right.
surveillance of that. He could say, well, I live in Moscow, it's cold. And then somebody said somewhere along the line, I think I read it in an article that he had a history of like some OCD tendencies.
Right.
So if he washed his hands a lot because of that, maybe then he would wear gloves. And then also it was COVID, right? So a lot of people were wearing gloves around because they don't want the germs, right?
Right.
So that could be something he could argue. And then this whole thing of him turning off his phone. I mean, it sounds like that's the allegation here, right? That they think that he
Right.
turned it to airplane mode or whatever. I mean, he could argue, well, who knows? Like, it doesn't mean that he was at the scene of a crime, right?
Right.
So he could use that. Those are the kinds of things. Like, he would be looking at things like that to try to show that there's other explanations, right, for all of that stuff.
Okay. That was from Tracy Rojas. Thank you. Jenny Lou has a question. Says, do we think he returned to the scene later that morning to search for the sheath? Hence why he was there again around 9 a.m. I also believe that's when the front door was left open.
Yeah, I thought that too. Like maybe it occurred to him when he was calming down, assuming that he did this, of course.
Right.
That could be a possibility that he went back because maybe he thought he dropped it like in the driveway or wherever he parked his car. Maybe he went back to look for it.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I mean, it's interesting that he went back like that, the next day or later that day, I guess, because it happened around 4 or whatever the time was. But it's possible.
Thank you. Pam Kogan says, question, what do you make of the long meandering loop Kohberger took after the murders, evidence disposal? And that's what I was kind of talking about earlier too. I don't remember what page it was on, but I just thought it was kind of weird.
I think that's definitely a possibility. I mean,
yeah.
But then again, like the fact that he made a loop, right? Like, or whatever, like wherever he was driving like that. I mean, his attorneys are probably going to be like, so maybe he was out for, maybe he was out driving, maybe he wanted to go for a joyride at whatever time it was, who knows? Right. So, but it's definitely something to think about. I mean, that's definitely something that definitely makes you think and wonder. Yeah. And it also makes me wonder too, like, because we're only seeing part of this, maybe they have other corroborating evidence, like maybe he was disposing of something, maybe they even have something else, we don't know.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Hootie says, was the only DNA they found on the sheath?
According to this, in terms of the crime scene, yeah, according to this affidavit. And then they compared it with the trash that was left at the curb at his Pennsylvania house.
Okay. And I'm guessing because they said it's like on the button, so it seems like it's like a small.
Yeah, I think it's like a little sheath, and then you put the knife in there, and then this little kind of tab comes over and it snaps. So when he pulled it off, I don't know.
Wow. And maybe because I was wondering, like, with that, like, how would he only be on the button but not anywhere else or whatever? And so I'm wondering, like, maybe he's handled that knife previously without gloves. Maybe he touched it or did something.
Yeah, definitely.
Without gloves. I mean, there's so many, I guess, possibilities.
Yeah, it's hard to say like what that was, right? Because it could have been, maybe it was touch DNA, like you said. Maybe he touched it. Maybe it wasn't blood. Maybe it wasn't. Who knows? It could be touch DNA for sure.
Okay, it's me. Michelle says, "Is it the way the order of victims is listed on the affidavit in order of the killings, first, second, third, and fourth?"
No, no. I don't have the caption in front of me. I'm just looking at the statement, the actual statement of Brett Payne, I think. So I don't have that caption in front of me. But no, I mean, there's really no like rhyme or reason to that. I don't know if they did it by age or alphabetical or whatever. But no, there's no sort of procedural rule like that they would have to do that or anything.
Okay. John question transfer DNA question mark. I don't know.
Transfer.
Wasn't like a full question, I guess.
I mean, yeah, and I mean in terms of, you know, you could like if you let's say you hug somebody, right? Like then
Okay.
your DNA could be transferred to somebody else. So I don't know if he means like, is it possible that that could exist? Sure, that's a possibility.
Okay. Let me see what we got here. We talked about a couple of these things already here. Allie says, "Are we expected to see his trial in 2 or 3 years from now?" That's really hard to say, right? Like, I don't know.
It is hard to say. I would be willing to bet money that it's not within a year. Okay, I think we're going to see it go into the second year. Like this whole first year, I don't think we're going to see it happening in 2022. And anybody, like I keep going back to this. I apologize to keep bringing up the Daybell case, like that.
No, it's okay.
No,
it's fine. Yeah, everybody's been, a lot of people are following that.
Yeah. But I mean, if that's any indicator of like what we're looking at, it's going to be a while. You know?
Been a long time, right? Yeah.
That's been a really long time, and it's just, I mean, that has some like weird anomalies. Like, there's 2 defendants, there's like competency, there's a lot of stuff happening there. But if that's any indication of what we're in for, it's going to be a long time. Wow. So we'll see. But I would say the very earliest would be 2023. Okay. No, 24. I'm still not used to saying 2023. Yeah, no,
me too. And we already covered the chance of changing the venue. Somebody here said, okay, Amy says, "I would like to know why the roommates took so long to contact the police if she's seen a male in all black and that she didn't know in the apartment after hearing crying."
So hard to say. Yeah. I mean, the only thing I can think there is just that whatever she observed, like maybe it kind of startled her and like maybe even freaked her out at the moment, but she probably just like went back to her room. I mean, I have a hard time believing that if somebody was petrified of something like a man in the house, that they wouldn't call the police. So I feel like whatever her judgment was at that point, I don't think, I mean, I guess it's entirely possible, I should say, that like somebody could go into some kind of shock, right? And then maybe that would paralyze you. Because I think sometimes when people experience traumas, they shut down, right? They freeze and they just don't do anything.
Right.
So it's really hard to say. And you know, maybe they would even go so far as to get like experts to come in, you know, if there is a trial and explain that and explain her behavior.
It kind of completely unrelated, but I just remember of like, I don't know if the shooting, I don't know if it was Vegas or something like that at the concert. I don't know if it was Vegas or where it was. This guy, the Mandalay Hotel, the guy was like in a hotel from the roof shooting down with automatic.
Yeah.
He was shooting into this crowd of people. And a lot of people like, you know, ran, they ducked, but there were some people I saw, they just like shocked. They just stood still.
Yeah.
In the middle of like getting shot at and stuff, you know, so like everybody reacts differently.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It really is.
Oh, and this one, I'm not sure. So Cheryl from the chat says, "Could the alleged text messages shared by 10 to Life with crime scene info from the FBI agent compromise the integrity of the case?" I haven't seen that. I've heard people talking about it. I don't know if you've heard of that yet.
I did hear about it. I don't know all the details, but I did hear that it sounded like something got leaked a little, like somebody knew one of the FBI's agents who were there or something like that. But it's definitely going to depend on the timing of something like that in terms of like, was the gag order violated, for example? And if it was, that's just going to be like a contempt situation, right? Mm-hmm. But could it damage? Yeah, sure. I mean, like, that's why we want a gag order in place, because we don't want that happening. We don't want that information. Now, in this particular case, I think what came out is it jives with what is in this PCA. So I don't think that we learned anything necessarily there that we shouldn't, because we have it all in this affidavit anyway. Right. But if other information was to come out that was leaked to somebody, that could potentially be a problem.
Okay. Travelin says here, "What about the fact they released personal belongings to the family? Will that hurt the case?"
I don't believe so. You know, I'm sure I was a little surprised. Like, I'm not going to lie, that definitely took me back a little that they were doing that. I would think that they would just wait until that whole thing was like cleared, right? Because they still retained custody of that after they removed some of those items. So that's where I was like, huh? Like, because,
Right.
that to me just didn't make a lot of sense. The fact that they were putting things in boxes and stuff, like that they had a U-Haul truck or whatever that was, like, I mean, that was a lot of stuff they took out of the house. So, I mean, hopefully
Right.
that's not a problem, but it definitely was concerning to me.
C Powers here says they keep saying vehicle number 1. Is there a vehicle number 2? And I guess they're
Hmm.
talking about. Let me look at the exact verbiage.
Yeah.
I don't know why they
I
word
mean,
it like that. I mean, I do see that
yeah.
suspect vehicle 1.
I don't know if they're referring back to. It does get a little confusing, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if they're trying to refer back. Let me just see something here.
Go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah, vehicle 1, blah 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 blah. I see vehicle 1. So let me see. Suspect vehicle 1. Trying to see where did they mention another one.
I don't think I ever saw.
Was there another one, or it's just suspect vehicle 1? So yeah, maybe it's possible that they identified. Let's say that they had footage of other white vehicles. Maybe when they were tracking all of this stuff, in order to keep it straight, like in terms of all the video footage that they had, maybe they identified his car, just calling that's this one. We're going to say that's number 1, right? Because maybe they had footage of a lot of other white cars or white Elantras or whatever,
Right.
and it could be that they had like 40
Right.
different cars and they're trying to track them all to see where they all
Right.
go. So that's probably just something they used internally to like isolate his car as opposed
Right.
to like all the other ones.
Okay. Tracy Rojas says, "Do you think outside big name lawyers will also come in to help?"
Um, it's possible.
Yeah.
A
You
lot
think
of
maybe
times
for the
though,
notoriety or no?
it's a possibility, but I don't know that this public defender would want that. Sometimes, like, and this isn't true of like all attorneys, but like sometimes attorneys don't like to share.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And I mean, that sounds weird, right? But what I mean is like maybe a big name attorney will they would want to come in, but they want to be like the whole thing. Like they want to
Mhm.
handle the whole thing themselves. They don't want to work with somebody else. You might find that. I mean, there's a lot of attorneys out there who have like that sort of bravado and and they want
Can
to just be
some
like
can
take all
some
the credit.
can some big shot defense attorney reach out to him and be like, "Hey,
Yes.
we'll offer to take over. You don't need to have this public defender. We'll
Yeah.
take care of you."
Absolutely. A private attorney could contact him and, express an interest in representing him. And if he wanted to, he could go with the new attorney. It's totally would be up to him to do that. But I definitely think that it's possible that a big name attorney, or somebody, maybe somebody starting out who wants to become like a celebrity attorney or,
Right.
have that sort of status, then maybe they would take it on pro bono. It's not
Mhm.
unusual that happens.
Very interesting. Okay. Nick says, "Who called the DoorDash food that night at 4?" I thought that was
It said in here that it was Xana, right? It was her food, but I don't know that it says if it's on page 3, I think, at the bottom.
4 right here.
Oh, you're on page 4?
Mhm.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm at the bottom. Like I'm looking at 3 on the bottom. Okay, I gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it says the exception of Kernodle, who received a DoorDash order at the residence at approximately 4 a.m. So I mean, I guess that it doesn't say specifically, but it implies that it was her food. So I'm assuming that she ordered it.
Yeah,
I'm sure they looked up, like, law enforcement checked that all out.
probably so. Yeah.
You know,
Okay. Ulnar says, let's see here. Explain the strangeness of the November 14th phone pings, please. Very weird that it's in the transcript. November 14th. Let's see.
all right, let me look it up. Let me look up November 14th. Oh, is that the one? That was the day after, then, right? So it
Yeah.
kind of suggests. Is that the one? Let me find it.
Let's see here. It's on page 13.
Oh, okay.
I think this is the one I'm referring to. Let's see.
Oh,
I think it's the day. That's the day after. So, they're talking about. Okay, let me see if I can get to it. There was the day after where they said that the phone pinged.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the one where they said the phone pinged in the area, but they don't believe it was in the area? Because there was the one on November 13 where he was actually there in the morning, and then they said on
Right.
the 14 that it pinged. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, okay. It's underneath that map. It's probably on yours, maybe page 14.
Okay.
It's like there's a map, and then it's underneath the little map. Do you see that? I'm going by the numbers on the bottom. On mine, yeah, page 15, I think is the actual. Yeah, there it is. See the top paragraph?
Yeah.
So it says.
Okay, there we go. So, okay, yeah. Investigators found that the 8458 phone did connect to a cell phone tower that provides service to Moscow on November 14, but investigators did not believe the 8458 phone was in Moscow on that day. I was kind of confused about that too. And it says the 8458 phone has not connected to any towers that provide service to Moscow since that date. So I wonder why they thought that.
It seems like it didn't ping to any of the towers. So like perhaps then from that day off, or after that day, I mean, like, so at some point on November 14th, right, it connected to a cell phone tower, right? But maybe he was near it or something. Like, I don't know. I know they show this little map, but like to me, the map was kind of confusing. I don't know about anybody else.
I couldn't even look at that. It was like
what am I looking at? Right? It's like, I don't know. It looked like something a little kid drew or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, what am I looking at here? But is this okay? Because it has this red triangle, right? So it kind of looks like, but then there's that blue thing. So I'm very confused. But if this red thing up in the corner on the left, see that little red triangle? So if that is where it pinged, right? Then it's possible. I'm just looking at the map and thinking in my head, and like I don't have like an actual map to compare it to, but maybe it pinged, like maybe it was nearby that, and then at that point he shut it off. Maybe I'd like to know. So this phone was never came up again in Moscow, right? So like, no. Did he discard the phone? I mean, did that phone ever? I can't remember now the dates. I have to go back and look. Oh yeah, I think it did. So yeah, because did it? So what I'm wondering is, did he discard that phone and stop using the phone, or I'm just looking at the dates.
I don't think he did. I feel like this is a piece that like
it's kind of weird, right? It's kind of weird. I don't understand the relevance of that unless they're trying to suggest, because it says it has not connected to any towers. So that means that it was probably
in Moscow.
Near that. It was, so it was there, and then it was never seen in Moscow again. So did he take that phone, turn it off, and then like on purpose, right? Like to just say, maybe he was like scared. And I mean, assuming he did this, of course, this is all alleged. Maybe he was just sort of like freaking out or whatever. And
they're saying maybe it bounced or something, because the proximity.
Yeah, like it's weird.
Close. So maybe it bounced there, but it wasn't actually there. I don't know.
That is a weird thing. Mm-hmm. Whoever observed that was a good one, because it's like that is a little odd to think about that one.
The Glare says, "What's up, Glare?" Glare has a question.
The ever-loving Glare. he knows what I'm talking about. It's like another creator who uses that phrase.
The ever-loving. Oh, okay, gotcha.
The ever-loving phrase.
He says, "Mr. Maven, do you think that the evidence mentioned in the affidavit could be enough to convict them
with nothing else?"
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Okay. I mean, I think there's more. And I think that, anything else that you can bring to a case would be awesome, because it's going to make your case stronger. But I've seen cases where there's been convictions on less. So I think that there's enough in here personally that, assuming that it was all admitted and everything, that, you could get a conviction, I think.
Okay, and this one you already touched on. Another one, name says, Jess, if Brian was your client, would you advise him to take a judge or jury trial?
That is a good question. It depends on what's going to come out, because if you have, usually when you want a bench trial, right, where the judge is the one deciding your fate, you're going to want that if there's some sort of a legal issue that a jury wouldn't understand, right? Or might, it would be maybe a little hard for them because they're not trained as an attorney to sort of grasp the significance and depth of the issue. So it could be like a procedural problem. And you might want a judge who's very familiar with the procedure, like the law, the criminal procedure law, to decide, because you might think, well, they're going to be a person who's very well versed in this and they're going to see it for what it is, right? So maybe you don't want to take chances by giving it to a jury who might not understand like the legal relevance of following procedure, right? So that's the only time I would recommend that he would have a bench trial.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. I had to switch cameras for some reason. That's never happened before. The other one's like shutting off, overheating. It's weird.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so the next question, let's see what we got. Okay. Stephanie King, do you think they found the weapon in Johnson, Idaho, based on the PCA alluding to his time there? So we don't know that they found the weapon yet, but that's back to that whole area that I was we were talking about. And I was telling you that I just think it's weird that like he went over this area, Johnson. Maybe I should just kind of read over it again.
Yeah.
It says additional analysis of records for the 8458 phone indicated that between approximately 5:32 and 5:36 p.m., the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources to provide coverage to Johnson, Idaho. The 8458 phone then stops reporting to the network from approximately 5:36 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. That is consistent with the phone 8458 phone being in the area that the 8458 phone traveled in the hours immediately following the suspected time of the homicides. Following the suspected time the homicides occurred.
Yeah. I mean, I think it hints that he was doing something during that time period, right? So then if you follow that, right, then you might think to yourself, well, what would he be doing at that point? Like, I mean, it's all speculative, really. It's hard to say. Like, it's really hard to say because we're so limited to this.
Right. I mean, is it just the route that he chose to travel, between places and he turned off his phone? But yeah, it's pretty odd. I know a couple of people have pointed that out as well.
Definitely.
Let's see. Grumpy says, why did they even ask the public for help with the Elantra? Seems like they had it covered.
Well, we don't really know the sources of all of this footage that they had. So, the more they have and the more they can substantiate and the more they can corroborate, the stronger the case is, the stronger that particular piece of evidence becomes, right? So if they had like a whole bunch of video, right, but they had a gap somewhere along the line and somebody just happens to have a Ring camera that can fill that in, that's just going to fill it in a more complete picture. And it's definitely going to just make all of that, like in terms of like a timeline and everything and his location, it's going to make it a much stronger case. So
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were on it pretty quick because this is from November 29th. The WSU officer, they queried white Elantras and they found it linked to Kohberger.
Right. Yeah, they were. I mean, I find this like remarkable, right? Because they were, and I had said that to somebody. I said, I think it was my mother. And my mom's like, do you really think, Jess, that they're going to solve this? And I'm like, listen, Mom. And I said, I really think that they probably have, a person of interest here and we just don't know,
I was doubtful, to be honest. I was kind of like, I'm thinking they don't have much. And I was completely off. They had a whole bunch.
Yeah.
I was pretty surprised. And they were getting a lot of heat too from a lot of people. So they did a good job.
Yeah, I think like what we know as the public was like just such a little percentage of everything. And and it was just because, I'm somebody that's interested in true crime and like I'm always like talking about it to whoever will listen to me in my spare time.
Yeah.
But I think that we're like, man, I hope they have more and whatever. And it's easy to, because we weren't hearing things being released very frequently and stuff, that
Right.
it's so easy to say, well, they must have nothing.
Right.
But
Right.
then there are cases that go on and on, but then, all of a sudden there's an arrest out of the blue, like in the Orrin and Orson West case, for example, right? There was like
Right.
nothing. It was like silent. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, the arrests. And then we got the affidavits and all that stuff. So, it's amazing to me. As you would say, it's amazing.
Amazing. And let me ask you just like your thoughts too, just on this, that this guy was like studying in criminology and like, that I don't know, maybe he thought he'd be able to get away with things. And it just like how we talked earlier, that like I guess it's one thing to like know the recipe or something, and another thing to actually practice it.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any thoughts about just his expertise, maybe?
Well, I mean, I just want to say this because
Yeah.
it's been bothering me because
Oh,
I have a friend who's actually a criminologist, she's a doctor of criminology, and something that's bothering criminologists about this case is that they feel like people think that because you study criminology, and she's got a PhD in it, right? And she's like, just because you have a PhD or a doctor of criminology doesn't mean that you're like training to go kill people or do a murder, right?
right.
So I just want to say, like, to all the criminologists out there that like we're not, we're not judging you like that.
Everybody's looking at them different now and stuff. We're like, oh wow.
Right. She was like, I don't like this. I was like, all right. She's like, that's really like a fallacy, right? So I mean, I definitely think that him having that education and that background, it correlates to this. I mean, it has to in some way, right? That insight. And then we don't know, like, what exactly did he study? I mean, it really depends. I mean, I was in law school, right? And in law school, you learn all kinds of law, right? You're going to learn all kinds of the basics, right? But then you might take it upon yourself to go work in a certain kind of law and then get that insight. So did he do that here? Like, something that troubles me as an attorney, and it really, the thought like kind of gives me chills, is because I thought to myself, there's nothing stopping somebody from going and looking at old famous cases and trials and trying to learn from that. I mean, if you have that kind of criminal mind and that inclination, and trying to find the weaknesses in those cases and then somehow exploit that if you're planning a crime, which is a horrible thought to even think. Like, when I thought that, I was like, ugh, like I felt sick thinking that. But I definitely think because of the fact that he was studying all of this stuff and asking those questions with the Reddit thing and all of that, it's very alarming. And I definitely think he would have insight that would probably help him. I know my friend's going to be like, don't say that. I'm going to be like, I told you.
A lot of people have been talking about that and wondering, like, does it help or whatever? But yeah, like all these people are not like, they're not training to be killers and how to get away with murder.
Yeah,
Like,
I think like, like it just might give him more, like much more awareness of these cases and of the criminal mind. I mean, like the behavioral, the BAU, right? The behavioral analysis unit. Like they have people studying the criminal mind. There's, I think, psychologists there, but there's criminologists and things. So obviously, like he's going to have some more understanding of that stuff than just like an average person who doesn't study it.
Right.
So.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to get that in there because I was like, I gotta ask you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Okay. The neighborhood says, I just don't understand why he would need to fly there to drive back. So weird. I guess they're talking about the father.
The dad,
the conversation, yeah.
It's so hard to say. Like, I don't know. I don't know what their family dynamic was, or like maybe it was planned in advance and it was going to be like the road trip with dad. I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe he didn't like to drive alone. Like, who knows? It's hard to say like why that happened.
Did you hear about his sister too? That like supposedly she was in some sort of like, or I don't know if she directed or was in a
I
movie or horror
saw
movie or
that.
some
And
sort
you
of
know what? I feel bad because, just being his relative doesn't make her
like
guilty
everybody's
or a
right, right,
suspect in anything. And, his assuming that he did this and assuming he's guilty of this and is found guilty, it's like the number of lives that he is permanently affected for the rest of their lives is tremendous. It's probably like you can't even count it up. And I feel bad for her because really, what does that mean? Like, so what, right? Like, so what? So she was in a horror movie or directed a horror movie. That's her. Like, has nothing to do with what these allegations are with him.
okay. Somebody says, and I guess this would be just speculation. John says, "Do you think he has been in that house before the murders?"
That's something that is such a good question. Um, before all of this, that was huge in my mind. I kept saying, like, the defense attorney is going to love this because they're going to say, oh, his DNA is in there, but of course it's in there because he was in there before, right? Like, it's
Right.
a no-brainer, right? Like, you can make that argument. But I feel much more or less concerned now seeing this affidavit, like seeing what they have, because I think that the DNA on that knife, like the murder weapon sheath, that's pretty strong evidence there. It's hard to explain that. Like, how do you explain that? What was his sheath doing there
Yeah,
at the
no.
crime scene?
Right.
I mean, it's like, did he visit the house and he just happened to drop the
Right.
sheath? And then the sheath just happens to be the same kind of like sharp blade instrument that was allegedly used in these crimes. I think it's weak. Let's put it that way.
Right.
If they had just found DNA in the house, right? Like, they found it somewhere. And I don't mean like commingled blood or anything like that on the victims, but if they just found his DNA in that house, that would have been terrible because it would be so arguable. Like, of course his DNA is there. It would be very weak DNA, but this is very strong DNA, in my opinion.
Got it. Auburn says, should DA only prosecute one murder first?
Oh, you mean instead of having no? There'll be one trial here. It's 4 separate acts here, but he's being charged for all of them. And so it's also because all of those deaths are like coming out, all of those acts are coming out of the same set of facts and circumstances, right? So there's always an issue too with things like that about judicial economy and efficiency, meaning like we don't want to have 4 separate trials with the same experts, the same people, the same amount of time that's going to be spent on a trial. It makes no sense to do that. It's all the same,
Right.
same series of acts. Yeah.
Makes sense. So Jason here says, what if he says he was there before for a party? But still, it's like the whole
Well,
sheath thing. But yeah, he might say
maybe he was, but how did the sheath of a weapon that he may own, because they don't really say that it was his here, but I'm sure that they're going to try to figure out the origins of that weapon and see if it belongs to him and tracks back to him, right? It's going to be much harder to explain how it got there and being next to one of the victims' bodies, right? I mean, and then we don't know the DNA. Like, what was the DNA? I mean, if it's maybe he caught himself. I mean, I definitely have suspicions about that because they were looking at his hands in that body cam footage. So maybe the DNA they have from that knife is his blood, right? And that's going to be a lot harder to explain.
Okay. Bard Music says, autopsy 911 call, crime scene photos missing from affidavit. Yeah, I mean,
that's normal. I was actually surprised to see those little picture thingies in there with like the tracking and stuff, which personally I didn't think they added anything. I found them distracting and confusing. But normally you wouldn't see that. They might reference, they could potentially like reference like a portion of an autopsy report, but they wouldn't actually include it in this. It's just fact based. It's just somebody stating under oath, what the basis for the warrant is.
Margaret here says, I even read today the first DNA might be less integral. If true, why? I haven't heard of that. I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't heard that, so I'm not sure.
See if I can look up anything on that. But I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah.
I'll get the next question in the meantime. Okay. Claudia says, do you think Bryan feels confident or freaked out after seeing the affidavit?
Well, I can't say what's in his head, but I was a little bit struck by his demeanor in court today. I don't know if you saw that little thing they did, like the hearing, and they showed him, and he's like nodding and stuff, and
Yeah.
and he was like just really calm. I mean, not that I expected him to go in. I'm sure he was advised, like, don't go in there and act emotional and act crazy or yell
Right.
or cry. Like, don't do anything. Just go in, and they're gonna. I mean, optics matter, right? So they're going to. The attorney's going to tell him, go in there and keep it together, be professional. Keep yourself under control, type
Right.
of thing,
Right.
because the optics matter, right? And I mean, he kind of looked. Someone told me today that after they saw it, they said they felt sick because they said that they had read this and they saw him, and that their impression was like, oh, he looks like this perfect angel. Like, had you not known this stuff, right? That just
Wow.
sitting there in court like that, nodding his head, and he doesn't have anything visual, like there's no cuts or bruises or anything like that, right? And he's just sitting there, he's nodding. So it's very like whatever. And so, like, that stuff matters, because it's all the optics of this. And with trials and stuff like that, that stuff comes into play.
Let me ask you I noticed when he got off the plane and they walked him to the vehicle, they put a helmet on him. Is that so he doesn't go crazy and bash his head? Do you know any reasoning behind it? I was wondering why they put a helmet on him.
I think that was for his own safety.
Okay.
That's my gut reaction. I mean, I can't be sure. I don't know 100%. I've never seen anything like that before,
Yeah.
but I've never been involved in a case like that has this kind of circumstances, right? With like somebody that seems to be so disliked by so many people,
Yeah.
either, right? Like, this is like,
Yeah.
he's like public enemy number one right now.
True. Punky says, would it be wise for a speedy trial?
It depends on the evidence. Only his attorney will be in a position to assess that. My gut feeling, and in death penalty cases, usually, from what I've experienced, you don't see speedy trials because it's death penalty, right? It would be like, it's very complex, and the attorneys want to have lots of time. And I would think, based on this affidavit, it seems like there's a lot of stuff they're going to have to go through. They're going to have to get a lot of experts in. So this is a lot. Like, this is going to be a huge task, a huge undertaking. There's going to be like a staff working on this. But if there was something that the prosecutors, maybe they would need more time. Like, let's say there's some other kind of DNA evidence and it requires some kind of extensive testing that's very tedious, for example. Okay, this is hypothetical.
Right.
But maybe in that instance, like, your attorney would know, let's hurry up and get this over with, because they're not going to be able to get all that evidence within 6 months. It's possible. See, and that's why it's really important in cases, especially in true crime, that we don't rush arrests, right? Because there was like that one case with Leilani Simon, and there were people like, hurry up, arrest her. Like, what are we doing? We got to arrest that lady now. And I'm like, that's the worst thing to do, because she could go in and demand something and they have no evidence. And then she gets acquitted. I mean, an acquittal, that means she walks. So we don't want that,
So it can be strategic. So
Yes.
some people do react
Absolutely.
really like harshly to law enforcement. Why is it an arrest? What, like you said,
Yeah.
and that could actually, so it can be damaging to arrest the person too fast, like to the.
Oh yeah, definitely. The more you have, because you have to think, as a prosecutor, really what you have to have in your mind is like, if I was asked to go to trial tomorrow, I mean, and this is like hypothetically, you're never going to be asked to go to trial tomorrow, but in your mind, you want to say, like, what evidence do I have? What do I have here, and what would happen? Because that's a good way to like identify where your weaknesses are and where you need evidence.
Okay. Let's see if I have any more here. Other than DNA, best defense strategy for acquittal. I think you kind of covered that already too. Let's see what else. Any thoughts on, well, targeted or not targeted?
Well, because of the fact that they have those 12 like, was it like 12 pings or something, right?
Right.
12 something. I don't remember if it was like, I think it was the cell phone
I thought
pings
it was 12 or
in
13.
June, right? I think,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it was in June. So it seems to show that it suggests that he was watching and maybe stalking, things like that.
And house versus the occupants. Do you remember that whole thing? There was this kind of confusion where the police
Oh,
were saying,
yeah. You're right. You're right. I remember that.
but it seems like it's.
I
I
think
wonder.
it's occupants. I don't think it has anything to do with the house, personally. And only like I'm saying that based on this affidavit, that 12 ping thing, that it seems like he was watching them and stalking them. So if he was in other places, keeping an eye on them, I think it has to do more about it pertains more to the people, the victims, than it would to like targeting that house.
Okay. Um, New Orleans lady was asking again, and she was just want to kind of clear things up with the camera stuff. So she says the judges have banned camera. When the judges have banned cameras, can they reverse the decision later, or is it set in stone? So,
Once they make their decision, I've never seen it challenged. Well, that's not true. I've seen it challenged, but I have never seen it overturned and go back the other way.
okay. Question. Most says, and this is from Sucha. Now knowing that the roommate saw one person leave the house, do you think there is an accomplice? Because BK said, has any? Okay, so what are your thoughts on this whole thing where BK said, has anyone else been arrested? That, allegedly, supposedly, he said that.
I don't buy that. I think that was
Just some sort of
I
like,
think that was like, let me
yeah,
like
yeah, I
throw
think,
that out there, right?
yeah,
Because I think that he knew at that point, like he was screwed, right? Like
right,
what's he gonna say, right? So that's probably. I don't think he said much, by the way, to the police either. You know how they said he was talking a little bit and then he invoked his right to counsel. Um, it seems to me that that was just like a ploy, just try to maybe put some doubt in the minds of uh, law enforcement. And that is, again, like I'm saying all of this, it's just alleged, right? So he's obviously innocent until he's proven guilty, but that's how I would see that.
okay. Busted Can of Biscuits says, what do you think Ann Taylor was looking for when she revisited the crime scene? MO question mark.
That's a good question. I mean, I would think obviously she's going to be looking for anything that to her, because at that point, I'm trying to think if I don't think that she had seen the affidavit at that point. So it's hard to know exactly what she would be looking for. But I would think like they're going to be looking at ways of ingress and egress of the house. They're going to look at the layout of the house, and they would probably be looking for ways to explain certain kinds of events, like how could things happen procedurally? Are there other ways of getting around the house somehow? Like that sort of overview. I think that that's kind of what they would be looking at that point, because I don't think they had this at that point. I don't think that his attorney had this at that point when they went in there, if I remember
Right,
correctly, with all of this.
right.
So it would probably be like, number one, they want to get a good sense of the crime scene itself, right? I don't know if they had experts with them, but like the experts could be there because they might say, well, there could be another explanation for the entry, for the exit. Here's an alternative theory, so they're going to be looking for things like that. Like, how could somebody get in that house and how can they get out of the house? And, because they're going to have to deal with the fact that that roommate saw somebody matching his description in the house. So
Right.
they're going to try to find anything that they can to sort of like mitigate that.
Another question from Busted says, how likely slash unlikely would it be for prosecutors to have the murder weapon but not disclose finding it in the affidavit?
I mean, that's probably a question of strategy.
Mm,
So there could be reasons why they're not going to put that out there. That's a very strong piece of evidence. Like I mentioned earlier, like direct evidence of a crime. It kind of speaks for itself if they can match it up to everything, like the sheath and the wounds and all of that. But that might be something that they want to hold back from him. Maybe they want to keep that and they don't want, like maybe they're thinking like, let's show him some, but we're going to hold back some of these big pieces. And maybe they're doing that because they not only don't want to tip their hand to him, but maybe there's even a psychological component to that. Like maybe they're thinking, maybe this guy will confess. Like maybe he'll wonder or something, like maybe they found the weapon, right? And then maybe they'll use that in a way that they're hoping it'll make him doubt or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's the only thing I can think of at this point. I don't know. It's really, again, I hate to keep saying it's hard to say, but
Right.
with the limited information that we have, it's so hard to like say one way or give a percentage.
But if they wanted to, they could do that.
They can withhold that now. I mean,
Right.
they're going to, during discovery, they have to
Right.
get that information over and everything. But at this stage of the game, they don't have to put that. Like, they could definitely have more concrete, substantial evidence that we have no idea about. And that's okay. Like, they don't have to put it out there. They just have to go to that low standard, which is to make the judge believe reasonable person, to believe a crime was committed.
But during discovery, they would have to show their hand, everything.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah, they can't hide it.
When does that happen? Right after, like...
That will probably happen like in months from now because, I mean, and I'm assuming, by the way, that he's going to plead not guilty. And I think that he will plead not guilty. I don't believe at all that he's going to enter a guilty plea. I mean, I don't think you're going to find an attorney that would tell him to enter a guilty plea, because there's going to be like the preliminary hearing and he's going to hear the probable cause evidence, but they don't have all the evidence at that point. They don't know what other evidence is out there. So that's why you have discovery.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's going to happen. I don't know, like I said, the timeline of the Idaho courts. I have read in various places that it's kind of backed up. So that could delay it a little. But usually this takes months and months to get through.
Okay. SW4x4 Explorer says, thank you for the super chat, says, do you think they found his shoes or clothes he wore doing this? After they arrested him, they served a warrant to search for BK's place.
I definitely think that's possible, particularly the shoes, because they put in that parenthetical about the vans. It's like, why would they do that unless they have something? So I definitely think that's a possibility. I don't know about the clothes, but I tend to think possibly the shoes because of that little mention in here.
Okay. Somebody said, do genealogy companies share information? I don't know.
I don't know. I do know that genealogy companies sell information. Kind of like they'll gather information about people. Sometimes they use it for like medical purposes and things like that. But I don't know if there would ever be a reason for them to have like, contracts amongst themselves for the exchange of information. I kind of doubt it, but I guess anything's possible.
Okay. And somebody earlier, let me get this other super chat first. Les says, from a defense attorney's perspective, is this a dream job or a nightmare? How can you do your job with this type of evidence mounting?
That's a good question. Honestly, I wouldn't want to represent this guy because I think they have their work cut out for them. So, right. I mean, if you enjoy a challenge, then this is a great case for you. Right. That's all I can say about that. But again, like, he is entitled to a fair trial. So, even if he did this crime and he's found guilty in the United States, he's entitled to fairness. And I'm all about that too. Like, he deserves and is entitled to that. So
LD Bonbon asks, what happens if they move this trial to a different court that does not have death penalty? Can they do that? Can that even be a thing?
No. That'll be decided in Latah County now, or Latah County, however you say that. And no, once that's decided, that won't change. It's all going to remain in the state of Idaho, just maybe in a different county.
Rebecca says, if he pleads guilty and there's no plea deal offered, what happens after that?
Well, then he'd get like the maximum sentence. Yeah. Life, I guess. Life in prison.
Any thoughts on the burglary charges? Just my question there. It's just because he's broke. He's in there, I guess.
Yeah, I just think because that's how he got in, right? It was a burglary, I guess. But I didn't really think about that. I don't really think it's that significant. I just think it's that he gained access that way, and it's another felony charge. So
okay. Chemo here says, I'm not sure. Mel, ask attorney if there is any real reason for gamesmanship from district attorney. I'm not too sure what that means.
I don't really know what it means, but if he clarifies or she clarifies, okay. I'm happy to answer.
Gotcha. I'm gonna scan real quick too, because we've been here 2 hours, so I don't want to hold you over. Okay. It says here, Leslie, thank you for the super chat. Says apparently 23andMe will not give DNA info out, but there are 2 smaller companies that work with LE. I did see something about that the other day when I searched that there's 2 other companies that do work with law enforcement. These other companies, they'll probably try to put up a fight, or you have to have a search warrant. I heard.
Yeah, you probably do. You probably have to serve it to get it. Yeah,
Okay.
They won't just hand it over.
Okay. The roommate. Question: Are the roommates lot? What question? The roommate are the police lying in the time of 911 call? I'm not sure what that means. You might have to rephrase that too. And the 911 call, that's just going to be probably during the trial, I'm sure, I guess, right?
Yeah. They'll probably release that. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to put out as far as like the affidavit or the case or anything?
I don't really. I just think that that it's so important that we remember the victims, because it's like, I know that it's hard to change focus now because of what's going on, but I do think I'm very like victim centric, and I work with a lot of crime victims, and so often the procedure and the criminal, they're the ones that get that attention, and this process for the families is like the beginning of the, and I just can't tell you like how hard this is going to be for them. And I think that, like I said earlier, most people have no idea about the criminal justice system. They don't really know necessarily how it works, especially in these kinds of crimes, like with these kinds of investigations and everything. And I just like, if you pray, then pray for these victims' families and friends, or send positive thoughts if you're not a religious person, but you think, in that way, because this is going to be like a really long road. And it's going to be really, really hard for them. So.
Right. And totally agree with what you're saying. And as we were talking, it just kind of made me think of this when I did jury duty one time and I got put on this case. I was always curious, but I didn't think I was going to be put on a month-long case.
Oh, wow.
Guy's name James Layritz, baseball player that had it was a Florida case. This guy had killed somebody and involved like a DUI thing. And I think sometimes too, it's kind of important. I know people don't want to do jury duty, but just to sit there and kind of understand like how tedious things are and like how long the process can be, and like the whole, it was exhausting. I was like done. Like I couldn't believe just sitting there coming every morning and the little things that a defense attorney will do. Because he got off, I think, with just like a DUI. I don't remember what it was. I don't know if he got off on lesser charges, but he had a really good defense attorney. Like they even brought up there was vitamin water, and I think they even tried to bring up like the negligible amount of alcohol in vitamin water to add up.
Oh my gosh.
Level that was in his blood. I can't make this.
I didn't even know that about vitamin water.
Like a small negligible amount.
Maybe I need to start drinking vitamin water.
They came up with everything, and they did the whole Reconstruction thing too, and they had their own experts and all that stuff. I was blown away by that case.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, when you get that first-hand view, it's like all different. Yeah.
And then when you're sitting there too deliberating, it's pretty interesting because I remember there was like one lady that just wasn't having it. Like we all kind of mostly agreed, but there was this one lady that just wasn't having it. So we're all going back and forth. It took at one point we even gave up. We were just like, we can't come to, and then the judge was like, go back, like try again. And so we said, all right, and we got.
So you just want to kick that person out, right? Like, come on.
So yeah, that was kind of interesting, but I think it gives some perspective because people just want things to be like instantaneous. And it's just not like that.
It's not. It's going to take a long time. Like this discovery process is going to take a long time. It's just it stinks. It's like we all want answers. I totally get how hard it is to wait,
Right.
We'll get answers, but it'll just be some time.
So Maven, Jess, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
It's my pleasure to be here. I appreciate you asking me to come on.
I really enjoyed talking to you. You're natural. People should go subscribe to her channel. I'll put the link in the description, in the title, the tag. Subscribe, check her out. Send some love. I'd appreciate that. And thank you.
You got it. No problem. Bye, everybody. It was good to be here, and I'll see you guys in the chat.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Amazing. I had to use my backup camera because I don't know what's going on. Those things all like zoomed in my face, pixelated and shit. Yeah, please go check out Mystery Maven if you can. I don't know where I went. I'd appreciate that. Super nice. I've talked with her before. She's called into the show. I've DM'd her before. And tonight before the live stream, I spoke to her on the phone. And once I spoke to her on the phone, like I knew like it was going to be a good conversation because she's just really easy to talk to. She can speak it in like layman's terms that everybody can understand, and she's experienced in her field, and she seems to me like just passionate about what she does. And so yeah, very, very nice conversation. I appreciate that. Go Find Me says she did so good. She should definitely subscribe to her channel. I was actually impressed. She did really good. Let's see what the chat is saying. News Nation. We can watch News Nation on Discord if you guys want to. I can't play it over here because that's live TV. I've seen other channels do that, but I'm not going to play that. I'm not going to take a chance like that. It's a paywall thing, but we could watch on Discord if you guys wanted to see. They're saying Kaylee's parents is going to talk. I was really shocked, and it was so important. I'm glad I was able to. So who sent this to me on Discord? And there's something. I think I'm going to wait for tomorrow. I could even do a whole nother live stream, but I don't want to say what it is. But I think I'll wait till tomorrow because it's 10. I kind of want to wind down a little bit. And I was just kind of like with this thing too. I'm so glad that they clarified this because the other day we were talking about this when these body cams first came out, and there was a lot of conversation about whether they knew, whether they didn't, and then Tammy had sent me the body cams as well directly, had sent me the article from ISP, I think, stating that they clearly to me stated that they didn't know, but then there was another article that said that they did know. This was all a plot and plan. And then now today we're updated and they're saying that these people didn't know. And what Jess was saying, Mystery Maven, made sense that this would not be a good thing for them to be like doing these stops, because maybe the defense could use this. So okay, let's go on Discord then if you guys want to hang out. Or Twitch and Discord. Just started Banfield. Steve Gonzalez will be on live. Hopefully they give him time to talk. But yeah, she did great, man. So please check out her channel. Maybe we'll have her back on sometime, when something like this comes up. And or we could maybe even do something in the future where I don't know, like I'd have to see how we do something because she could schedule a live and then I could push everybody over there, something like that. Discord. So Discord, I don't know if the commands are working right now. I'll put the link. Discord has a limit though, so you might have to watch me on Twitch. But yeah, she answered a whole bunch of questions. Great. I didn't even have time to like. She didn't know what I was going to ask her. Like I didn't have any kind of like I didn't even know half of the questions because I had. And thank you so much to the mods too. Love to the mods. So much love to Discord. You guys have been so freaking amazing. I'm so glad to have that community on there because I wasn't going to even do that. They're already waiting on me. And the other thing too, just real quick too, like with Mystery Maven, we had a little quick conversation because I missed the chase earlier. There was a chase, but I was out with Maddie, and I had told Maddie like we're going to the beach today, and so I wanted to make sure, that we went to the beach because I don't like saying I'm going to do something and I'm not going to, and then I don't do it with my daughter. And sure enough, when I was out, there was a chase. And so I just said, you know what? F that, man, because it's like, this is ridiculous. Every time I go out, there's a chase. Like, I feel like I can't go out. I feel like I'm on call, And when I'm here for hours, it doesn't really happen. But as soon as I step out, there's something going on, And so we had just this little conversation. It's just important with kids. They grow so fast. Spend time with them. So, but it was like an Oklahoma chase. Anyway, I'll be on a Discord for a bit, and we'll watch this News Nation thing. Thank you guys so much for coming through. I appreciate it. Please check out Mystery Maven. Subscribe to her because I'll just appreciate it if you do. All right. And I'll pin her comment at the end of this live stream too in the thing. All right. So I love you guys. Take care. Peace. Bye. Thank you. Bloop, bloop.